Expo 2021, C2UExpo mini gathering and award gala, this year's national gathering online. Today's event is an important placeholder until the next time we can safely gather in person at C2UExpo 2022 or 2023, hopefully in Montreal. More information to come from Concordia University and UQAM, Université du Québec and Montreal. We are very excited for this opportunity to gather all members of Community-Based Research Canada's family across the country and beyond. And we look forward to a dynamic time together. I am Joanna Ochoka, CBR Canada co-chair.
And I am Steve Dooley, CBR Canada co-chair as well.
Steve and I are the host of this gala. We have a 2-hour program with 2 main parts: the discussion panel about the future of community-based research in Canada, and the CBR Canada's award celebration. At the end, time to network and catch up with friends and colleagues. I hope you can stay longer. In the meantime, you are welcome to grab a drink for yourself. We'll have a toast together at the end of the program. But please don't start drinking yet. We are absolutely delighted about the partnership between CBR Canada and Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council in organizing this gathering. So big thanks to SHIRC for sponsoring this year's Emerging Community-Based Researcher and Excellence in Community Campus Research Partnership Awards.
Thanks, Joanna. I just want to let everybody know that CBR Canada is a national organization that informally started at C2UExpo 2021. And since 2016, we've been a nonprofit social enterprise funded by our great membership. It is home for community campus researchers who want to connect and conduct research for social change. Our mission is to advance community-based research excellence in Canada and beyond by strengthening partnerships, bridging capacities, mobilizing knowledge, and championing community-based research approach. Now, this event is organized by the CBRC Canada Secretariat, located at the Centre for Community-Based Research in Waterloo, Ontario, which is situated on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. I would also like to mention that I live in White Rock, British Columbia, which is on the unceded territory of the Semiahmoo First Nation. In the spirit of reconciliation, CBR Canada is committed to engaging with and learning from diverse Indigenous peoples and communities across Canada, as well as addressing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. Now, the event will be recorded, and please enjoy the program. And with that, I pass it over to my good friend, Marcel.
Merci, Steve. Je suis Marcel Simoneau, directeur du service aux collectivités de l'UQAM. C'est un plaisir pour moi d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Le Québec a une longue expérience de collaboration avec le CBR Canada. J'ai rejoint le comité de direction de CBR Canada en 2015 et depuis, comme partenaire universitaire, je suis toujours impressionné par les actions en mobilisation de connaissances et de collaboration en recherche partenariale avec les communautés partout au Canada. C'est ce qui nous rassemble. Votre participation à cet événement spécial aujourd'hui démontre que vous partagez les valeurs de CBR Canada et j'en suis ravi. Un beau programme nous attend, alors merci d'être parmi nous.
My name is Karen Schwartz. I'm from Carleton University, and it is my honor to introduce Elder Barbara Dumont Hill, who will be guiding us in an opening prayer. Thank you, Barbara.
She's muted.
Oh, okay. Barbara, could you unmute yourself, please?
Am I here now?
Yes.
Yes.
So sorry. Quick kana mino kamadzo, and hello everyone. I hope you're all living your life in a good way. Nia pintinenda manishnabe kwe Barbara Dumont Hill Nadishnakas Mikanakni Dodam Ketikanzibinadunjaba. I am a very proud Anishinaabe woman. My name is Barbara Dumont Hill. I am Turtle Clan and I was born on the Kitikanzibi Indian Reserve. Ogajikak Nipaji Jaje Gaki Kmotman. Mamiwanini. Today I welcome you all from our beautiful unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. I really like those that acknowledge their territory. It's a time for us all to think about where we were born, where we live, everywhere we've lived on this land, to acknowledge those territories, find out who those people were that first inhabited those lands, because it's an act of reconciliation in itself to understand the story you were told, that this land, it was just vacant and for the taking. It was all occupied. There was nations right across Great Turtle Island. And I think about community-based research, about what it was like for our people when we first were given the gift of being here on Great Turtle Island. And our community-based research was from the trees, was from the water, from the animals that lived here, that took care of the earth and then took care of us. And how important that is to have that gift to learn from them. And we are still learning from them. And our people said, you know, that every illness, every hurt that could happen on this land, there was the cure for it was here as well. Until those people started coming from other lands and brought things that our land didn't know how to cure. But we knew how to take care of ourselves. And if there had been community-based research then, how much of a better place we would all be in today. We would all be healthier. We would all be more loving and more caring about one another, about our beautiful earth. And with that, I think I would like to say a prayer of gratitude. And this prayer has been said, you know, since time immemorial on this land, and until it was banned. And, you know, when it was banned, we didn't understand why. And I've learned to say it in my language, but I was told that once I start saying it in my language, I shouldn't repeat it in English anymore. And I don't know my language, just I learned some words, an introduction, my prayer. And that, you know, when you hear this prayer, I want you to think about why was it banned? Because it is a prayer of gratitude. It is a prayer of community-based research. It is a prayer of understanding. Gratitude to Creator for giving us this day, this time to be together, to listen and to learn from one another, to share, to celebrate our lives here. I have gratitude today for Grandfather Sun, who shares his light with us each day, and our Grandmother Moon, who lights up our night sky and breaks down our seasons for us. For our sacred Mother Earth, who provides everything we need to live our life in the good way. For the breath of Mino Manitou, for the water, the sacred blood of our Mother Earth that quenches our thirst, brings life into the world, and reminds us that women are sacred. For the winged, the four-legged, the swimmers, for the crawlers, for all the trees, the plants, the roots, the medicines that grow here on this land, that add beauty to our life each day have always shared their bounty with us and shared their knowledge. For all our ancestors who created a good path for us all to follow, and those 7 generations of ancestors that we all have a responsibility to leave a good path, a good earth for. For all the people who live their life in a good way, who have respect for all of our earth and for all human beings, even if they look or act different than you. I ask Creator to touch each one of us today, to bless us with wisdom, with understanding, with health for us, for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, that we all understand we all belong to one Creator. We all have a responsibility to respect all of her creation. So for each one of you and all of these things, I say Chimigwech. Let's have a good evening and celebrate together. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Barbara. And let me just express, amazing that that amazing prayer of gratitude was banned. And thank you for the teachings. And let me express my gratitude to you for starting us off and grounding us in such a good way this afternoon. So thank you so much for doing that. Much appreciated. Now, I'm sorry to tell everyone, you thought this was going to be a fun event. It is going to be a fun event, but we're doing a test. You're going to have to do a test today. So what we're doing is just to get to know CBR Canada a little better. We're going to be popping in periodically with a trivia question about CBR Canada, rather than doing a big presentation about who we are. Now, what we'd like you to do, if you have a pen and a paper handy, just write down your answers on a pad, a paper and a pen, and we'll take up at the end an award. We'll summarize the results at the end of the evening, and you're going to want to stay right till the end because there's going to be a great, amazing prize to the winner. So this is not a poll. We're not going to be doing a Zoom poll right now. It is just the first question of our trivia. So C2UExpo is held every 3 years in a different location across Canada. Where was the first C2UExpo held? You can see the 4 responses there: University of Ottawa, University of Saskatchewan, University of BC, or was it a Zoom? Were we way ahead of ourselves by having our very first C2UExpo on Zoom? So we'll give you a minute to, well, less than a minute, answer that as quickly as you can, because it's very exciting to move on to the first part of our evening, which is our panel discussion. And it's my privilege to get to introduce our panel today. So I'm pleased to welcome our 5 panelists who will share insights on the topic of where we're going with community engaged research in Canada from 3 different perspectives. We have government/funders, we have people from the academic community on our amazing panel, and we have on the ground community practitioners as well. So our first panelist is Carrie Barassa, who as director of CIHR leads the advancement of a national health research agenda to improve and promote the health of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples in Canada. Before this, Carrie had spent over 15 years as a professor of Indigenous health at the First Nations University of Canada in Regina, Saskatchewan. Next, we have Dominique Berube, who's current VP Research at SSHRC, who is responsible for developing the long-term vision and future direction for SSHRC's core research funding programs. These include the Canada 150 Research Chairs Program, Indigenous research, and a research training strategy. We have Elaine Greeley, who's a practitioner who works on community-based projects and workforce innovation roles. Her research in community learning and development is exploring how career development practitioners learn, innovate, and grow in their professional practice. Kevin Hall, he just began his first 5-year term as the president of the University of Victoria. Previously, he has held leadership roles at Queen's University, University of Guelph, and University of Newcastle. And having talked to Kevin the other day, it's very clear that he is known for and very passionate about community engaged research. And Renee Mashing is committed to Indigenous health and wellness as a community-based researcher. She has been active in Indigenous, HIV, AIDS community, and with the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network. Renee is a member of 6 Nations of the Grand River. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our facilitator extraordinaire, Rob Rosehart, who is past president of Wilfrid Laurier University and Lakehead University, and is currently a board director at the Center for Community-Based Research. So he'll be leading our exciting panel discussion that is exploring the future of community-based research in Canada. Over to you, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. We've got a action-packed agenda here in the next hour. I'd just like to make very briefly a couple opening comments. I think in one form or other, community-based research has been around in Canada and internationally for more than 30 years. I think people in the early days often felt like they were pioneers or missionaries and were often misunderstood and not appreciated. I've been on the board of directors of CCBR for, I think, about 15 years now. I'm their treasurer, so I'm supposedly to keep the organization afloat. But in that 15 years, I've seen a lot more recognition, both in the traditional academic world, also in government and funding agencies. The communities never have been much of a challenge because community-based research deals with community issues and problems, challenges. So it's always been welcomed by the community participants by and large. Anyway, it is still evolving. And I think we're going to have some interesting perspectives from the panelists here today. The first challenge, they've each been asked to comment basically on their experience with community-based research, the value that they gained from that, and also going forward, what do they see as the opportunities and challenges in community-based research in the future. Each one of them is going to make a little summary comment on that, and then we maybe we'll have an opportunity to have some discussion about that. And then finally, the panelists will be asked an overarching question: what can we do together to promote the cause and betterment of community-based research in Canada? So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, who's going to be Carrie. Carrie?
Great, Chimigwich, thanks so much for the opportunity. I'm originally from Treaty 4 territory, and I'm honored to be here today. I guess my experience in some of the main challenges and opportunities. I had a Canada Foundation for Innovation lab originally back in 2011, I think. This was at the direction of communities. I've always been a community-based researcher serving Indigenous communities across Saskatchewan and nationally as well. And I think in terms of the opportunities, it really is about serving Indigenous communities, ensuring that they are leading the research, and that this is really truly about self-determination. So we have developed something called the CRAC, and we use this for every community that we work with. It's the Community Research Advisory Committee or circle or council, whatever they wish. But the communities are really the ones that tell us what they need. We help to facilitate funding. Some of the challenges have been that communities have not been able to hold their own funds. And so in the role of scientific director, that's one of the first things that I took on, was to ensure that we could reduce those barriers. And we're working with the Tri-Council. So Dominique, I'm sure, will want to speak to some of that as well. But it has been a challenge in some ways to sort of get this off the ground, because there are many administrative barriers that come with that. But many communities now do hold their own funds and administer their own funds. And so if you think about the TRC, we are now finally coming in alignment with many of those recommendations, as well as UNDRIP. So, you know, there are many challenges still ahead, but we are working on it. We're not patting ourselves on the back by any means. But this is really, I think, where community-based research needs to go. It is really has to be directed fully by Indigenous communities who are very, very diverse, as we know, and the needs are different. So I think I'll probably stop. Oh, I think there's another question. What could be done to build a much stronger community-based research agenda? Again, I think it is really ensuring that we can meet the needs of communities. There's a lot of work now being done in the field of knowledge translation, which is now being called knowledge mobilization. It's kind of shifting. So I think, again, making sure that that we are providing the appropriate tools for the communities that they need. And I know in working with you know, a variety of communities we're working on some apps, for example, like technology. And this was at the direction of Indigenous communities. And so some of the problems we have are connectivity, right? So how do we address those? Well, when we got some boosters, but you know, there's a lot of issues that sometimes we just can't solve. These are bigger problems that have to be addressed. And so, you know, sometimes these issues that get in the way are really things like that infrastructure, for example, that need to be addressed. Not only technology in terms of infrastructure, but we're certainly hearing this from communities that hold funds, that there's other infrastructure issues that really do need to be addressed. And so sometimes it's certainly above my pay grade, but these are challenges that I think we can come together to address. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you, Miigwech.
Great. Gary, thank you very much. For the remaining panelists, that last part, the future, I think we'll save to part 2, but Carrie got us off to a good start. Okay, so I'd like to call on Renee now. Renee?
Thank you. Hi, over here on the screen. So Barbara, thank you so much for opening us in with those good words. It's a moment of taking a deep breath and these wonderful opportunities to be on Zoom. So I'm zooming in from Mi'kmaq territory. It's also known as Nova Scotia, and it's such an amazing opportunity to be part of this panel and to have such a great engagement with panelists. And if we were in a room together and I had a PowerPoint behind me, I would have a picture up of my family, my husband and 2 kids, and just take a moment to say, you know, this work that I do, this research work, this engagement, this community work, it happens, you know, it's me doing the walking, but they're right beside me. And so I just want to really encourage all of us to take a moment and think of our loved ones who help us in the ways that we do our work. And those are 2-leggeds and 4-leggeds and all those who hold us up. And thanks so much, Steve. In my introduction, I identify as First Nation. My bloodlines are from 6 nations of the Grand River. I'm also Irish descent, and I was adopted. So I was raised in a family of Western and Eastern European descent. So I feel like a bit of I am Canadian poster child sometimes. So this opportunity, it's really exciting for my organization. I work with an organization called the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network. And so we're kind of bringing a bit of a community-based research practitioner perspective. We were established in '97 and really, you know, began as an organization that was responding to HIV/AIDS. And our mandate has grown over the years to be more inclusive now of sexually transmitted bloodborne infections. You know, our work, our network is founded on having a connection to Indigenous people who have living experience with HIV, with hepatitis C, and also with organizations who feed into what we're doing and direct our activities, including our research. And we began to get involved in research through the development of the Canadian strategy on HIV and AIDS. And I'm highlighting that in part because our research journey has been, I think, a combination of amazing opportunities and the wisdom of people whose shoulders I stand on to take advantage of those opportunities or to understand how to maximize those opportunities. And so it's exciting to be here with Carrie and with Dominique from Schultz. And when we began as activists in the HIV and AIDS community, this strategy was being developed, and there was going to be dedicated research dollars for HIV and AIDS. And this new institute was going to be created, this CIHR. And honestly, we were very distrustful of what was going to happen, and was there going to be an Indigenous focus? Was the AIDS money going to be respected within this great big new monstrosity? So we actually advocated right from the very beginning, and were successful in putting a moratorium on the transfer of funds from Health Canada to CIHR for HIV and AIDS research, and held that research money at Health Canada for a number of years. And I think that that's really created a foundation for the way that we've approached research as really tightly linked with advocacy. When we began doing our research work as a community-based organization, we really relied on our academic partners to help us to learn to be engaged in research, to pursue and navigate the research environment, and to help to build our capacity and understanding of the research process as this community-based research, this novel approach is being discussed. And of course, around the same time, we were also seeing an increasing amount of attention to Indigenous approaches to research, and began talking about decolonizing research methodologies and really giving voice to, I think you said, Barbara, we have ways of knowing the world, and we have ways of engaging and learning with research and being part of the research environment that looked different from what we would learn in university, but was very much a part of what we were doing. So early in 2012, we actually went through the incredibly exciting process of filling out lots and lots of paperwork to become an institution eligible to hold funds with CIHR. We're also actually pursuing that with Schultz now as well. And so that was a big step for us in terms of finding our autonomy and understanding our opportunities, and creating a bit more of a sense of control in the way that we would be engaging in our research. And of course, this all began with staff members and community members who saw this opportunity that was being developed through a strategy to respond to HIV and AIDS in Canada. And so when we would first go to our membership and talk about our research activities, there was hesitancy and concern about, what are you researching? How are we being researched? We've been researched to death. And so one of our early processes was actually to write a paper that we reframed as researching ourselves to life, and really understanding that this was an opportunity for us to give voice to the issues and concerns that came from our community related to HIV, living with HIV, the experience of HIV, and then more broadly, now growing into a larger focus that's inclusive of many more issues. And so that's really, we've seen a trajectory over the years where now our membership are very clearly directing us in terms of what should be researched, what are the topics we should be investigating, more and more how we should be doing that investigation, what kinds of approaches and methods are really meaningful. And so I think that's certainly one of the most exciting opportunities, I think, that has come through community-based research. And that's been part of what we value about community-based research, and that marriage between our advocacy goals and our interest in really having a deeper understanding and giving voice to our experiences of HIV and of what it means to be an Indigenous person in Canada as well in our research work. And so we've contributed to over 50 projects over the last 20 years. And that's ranged from local small projects to international work. And I think there are lots of opportunities that I would love to hear and contribute to more as we continue our conversation. I think when we think of challenges, and we're living in wild times. So there are many, many challenges to the ways that we would like to be doing our work, that, certainly being cut off from each other when we're doing community-based research and trying to build relationships when you're Zooming or, reminding somebody, oh yes, we met and we had tea. That's a challenge. But I think the two kind of obvious, Carrie's already spoken to it, funding is always a challenge. And as fantastic and exciting as it is that we are eligible to hold CIHR funds, we're not yet eligible for indirect costs. And so I really support the efforts that are being made to open that dialogue and see it grow. And also that there's, a support for community leadership in research, but there's also consistently this notion of a knowledge user and an investigator, and whether or not those two roles might be understood as equal. I certainly believe they are, but there's often this kind of, isn't it nice that you're doing research too, out of the institution, out of the academic hallowed halls of learning? And so I think that's an ongoing challenge that we face, of kind of needing to be clear.
Thank you, Renee. I think
perfect. Sorry.
No problem. You're on a roll. So
it's all good. It's perfect.
You mentioned indirect costs, so that's a good entree to our next speaker, Dominique.
That's such an inspiring introduction. I'll discuss indirect costs with you all. That's not exactly but yeah, I can mention it and try to integrate it in the discussion, because obviously it's a big part of the reality. Just to maybe to thank Elder Dumont Hill for the opening today. It's extremely important to be able to recognize why we meet and what's the reason of the work we do. And definitely I think that from a personal perspective, some of the most important community-based engagement and work that I've been doing in the last 5 years was working with different Indigenous researchers, communities, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit to try to come forward with a renewed Indigenous research strategy, and been working, of course, with Carrie and many of you around in those questions around what we can do. We did launch our new Indigenous tri-agency Indigenous research strategy in January 2020, where we, and I don't want to spend too much time, but we do have some important commitments. The pandemic definitely slowed us down in terms of our capacity to continue the engagement that was so intense to produce that strategy. But I think it's time to renew that, and it's going to be in the next few weeks, months, we're going to be able to announce the launch of the Indigenous Leadership Circle for Research. Carrie is an ex officio member of that circle, and it's really an advisory body to the presidents to be able to monitor the implementation of the strategy and provide us advice on the best way. So everything you're saying is going to be definitely something that is going to be of great interest to them in terms, and of course that body is going to be entirely composed of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. So that's the en termes de mon implication personnelle, je suis obligée de le dire en français. Mes premiers liens avec la recherche en partenariat communautaire proviennent de mon expérience à l'UQAM avec le service aux collectivités, maintenant vraiment oui Marcel, et avec le Symbiose et les chercheurs, bien sûr, Karen Messing, Catherine Lippel, Donna Mergler, the founders of that research center at UQAM. So just want to acknowledge, and I can see Dominique Michaud also in the assistance from Concordia, and Dominique, saluting you, because obviously Dominique was working very closely with them also at the time. So that's my anchor in terms of community-based research dates from early 2000, I guess. Wow, time goes by. So to go to the challenges and opportunities, I think I'll start with the opportunities, because SSHRC has, of course, Insight is what we call the Insight program, is where we support all the knowledge production. Whereas when we go to our partnership suite of programs, that's really where we of course also focus on the knowledge production, but in the co-construction knowledge and the what we call the recherche action and the partnership research, focusing on knowledge mobilization. And I think this suite of programs that we have now, we do have the partnership engage grants also, which are smaller grants to initiate those partnerships. And we do have the partnership development grants. This year, the success rates were around 70% to these grants. So, you know, it's really a great way to be supported in your work. with your partners and really encouraging you to come to us and to apply to those grants so that we can support you. Huge opportunities for us also, because when we did the evaluation of these programs in the last 5 years, the evaluation pointed out some very interesting characteristic of the kind of work that you all do, which you already know, but it's nice to have it in an official governmental report. We can then act on it when we want to invest on the and develop more. So one of the things was that it's almost too easy, that the engagement of non-academic participant correlates with greater use of research findings. So that's obvious. and I kind of hate when we say non-academic participant, because we define those participants by the negative, which we should never. We should be inclusive and describe them. So I need to be careful about that. There's also of course, more policy impact. But one of the impact that we often forget is that there's a huge benefits to students and postdoctoral that are involved in those partnership research projects. They do develop academic professional skills that lead to their own employment. Many often they will find work in the organization with which they partner or somewhere else, but that expertise is highly valued. And we think that we need to invest more in those models of training for the future. You asked about challenges, and I think that we heard from the first two panelists about some very important challenges. One of them is the complexity that results in, it seems for academic participants that do the same grant application every year, they sort of get used to it. But for a partner that is suddenly invited to, because it's unfortunately often how it works, your partners are being invited to collaborate. Very often that process is way too complex to allow a real partnership. And of course, also what we said, you mentioned indirect costs. Whatever it is, we need to recognize that the cost of participation needs to be acknowledged for, and we need to find ways, however we call it, maybe not indirect costs, but we need to be able to transfer money to recognize that these organizations need to be supported to do the research because it's not in their core funding. So again, we fall into an internal discussion at SSHRC, and I've got colleagues that are participating about what's our mandate and where we should be. But I think that we need to focus on the value proposition. That's a very governmental term, but really about where's the highest impact and how can we really make sure that that research is going to really impact the populations that we're working with. Inclusivity, equity with partners, I think within the governance, we do have to recognize also that it's the universities are very strong institutions. They're used to do that kind of work. It's very sometimes difficult for a smaller organization to be able to participate at the same level. The governance are complex, and we need to increase maybe the requirements in terms of recognition of the participation of the partners within the research and encourage that. So, and I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Yeah, I think I'll stop there to make sure that we have time for the rest. Bob, thank you so much.
Dominique, thank you. That was a very comprehensive overview, and I'm sure coming from your perspective at SSHRC, everybody on the Zoom call was paying very careful attention to each one of your words. So again,
yeah, including some SSHRC people, I'm sure.
Right. Okay, I'd like now to call on Kevin Hall, who's going to give a perspective on community-based research from a more academic perspective. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Bob, and hello, everybody. It's really nice to see my new colleagues and playmates at the University of Victoria on the call, and also many of you on the call that I've worked with in the past. I've just come back from 7 years in Australia, where I lived on the lands of the Worimi and Awabakal peoples, and I've absolutely landed in the best place in Canada, in Victoria, and I'd just like to acknowledge I'm here on the land of the Lekwungen peoples today. I'll pay my respects to elders past and present. I've been involved in community-based research since the 1980s. I know I don't look that old, but yeah, I have. Both as a researcher, I've been a vice president of research at the University of Guelph and also at the University of Newcastle in Australia, and now president. So I've kind of seen community-based research with a number of lenses. For me, globally, I've worked across sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, working typically in urban slums and marginalized communities, working with the women in the community to look at point of use water treatment systems to try to bring clean water and sanitation into urban slums. In Canada, I've been doing the same type of work since 1985 with the First Nations Technical Committee, with the Canadian Aboriginal Science and Engineering Committee, trying to really, again, bring clean water and sanitation into Indigenous territories. Is something we've absolutely terribly failed on in this country. That's really a huge disappointment, I think, for all of us. And finally, I'll just say I've been involved heavily with CETA and IDRC over the years, and one of the best projects for me in community-based research was in the post-tsunami recovery in Sri Lanka, where we worked with 20 small communities to restore livelihoods, to create economic growth and opportunities for the people after the tsunami. In terms of opportunities, I think what the biggest opportunity is in the name of your organization, which is the community-based research. That R needs to change. I think community-based research is fantastic, but it's also about education and training. And I think really to shine a spotlight on the education and training piece would really be a huge opportunity to be attractive to governments, to be attractive to both provincial and federal governments. I thought I would spend most of my time talking about what I see as challenges from the perspective of a researcher and also as a leader at a university. And I think the first challenge is really, how do we get our students more engaged? It's fantastic to have the students that are working in CBR now, but this is a great environment for all of our students that come through a university. We want to make them as active citizens as we can and try to solve some of the world's big problems. So I think that's really a challenge for us. A challenge around ethics. As a former vice president of research, ethics approvals are tricky at the best of times with the involvement of community. That creates another layer that we just don't seem to be able to deal with that well at universities. So we've got quite a bit of work to do on that challenge. The challenge around knowledge and IP. What do we do about that? What do we do when the community brings knowledge? What do we do with Indigenous knowledge and know-how? And how does that sort of fit within our systems that we've constructed around IP and knowledge sharing? I guess the other thing that comes to mind for me is the acceptance of community-based research in our campus and also with our funding agencies. We love to have these traditional academic metrics about publications in Nature and publications and citations and grant awards and students, PhDs produced. We often don't value the impact like we should. We talk about it a lot, but we really haven't cracked the nut of how to actually really acknowledge and give people credit for community-based research. And I'd say the same from the funding agencies. And Dominique, I know Schultz put a lot of great programs in place. I think the weak point for me is the selection panels, which are typically us, the academics. We're the hardest on our own. And, particularly I've sat around panels on CIHR, CFI, SHRC, and NSERC. And I've heard some of our own academics say, that's not really research, that's not in Nature. We do have to really have to overcome that attitude. And that also speaks to then, what are we doing around promotion and tenure? What are we doing around career progression? And what are we doing to really be able to acknowledge the input that the community puts into the research that we do as an institution? So I'll leave those challenges open, and hopefully we can have some discussion around that in the next 30 minutes or so. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, Kevin. That gives a very, again, comprehensive perspective from the academic world. And you've hit on a couple of the key issues that historically have plagued community-based research in terms of recognition. I'd now like to turn it over to Elaine. Elaine? Hi there.
So I'm a little bit of a fish out of water for today's panel in some ways. Asked to participate and really needed to challenge why the invitation was coming. So I'm deep in community, and I'm in St. John's, Newfoundland, calling from the east of the east. So hi, Renee, I'm close by. And I live and work on the land of the Mi'kmaq and the ancestral home of the Beothuk. And I get to see the richness of the Inuit and Inuit cultures. So my practice orientation is as a community educator. So that's been my kind of 30 years of work. which landed me as a career development practitioner. So that's folks who work in current employment. And that's kind of layered really with my, my orientation as a visual artist. So all those three kind of identities I kind of wear simultaneously. But the question of how did I come to community-based research is kind of an interesting one, I think, because working as a partnership broker with community, university, post-secondary, business, I had a really big problem I needed help solving. So I cold called a researcher and I said, hey, wanna work on this problem with me? And it became a 3.5-year really interesting learning journey for us. And that led to invitations to participate in other community-based research projects. And so I've had a ton of roles. I've been the community liaison, I've been the cheerleader, I've been the accountability officer, I've been the convener, the facilitator, the proposal writer, the process designer, the context expert. But I guess my perspective today is all of those roll up to a task, which is a translator. So between community and academia, there's a lot of translation that has to happen. And some of that is wooing people and convincing them that there's value in that for them. And I think now that I'm kind of getting to know some of you through this panel today, we've only met once before, I'm understanding that we really all go where the energy is in our lives. And so I have this really interesting friend who explained to me once that when she hears an ambulance siren, her heart skips a beat and she's just flooded with curiosity and action. And she's an emergency room nurse practitioner. That is like the siren is her thing. And for me, I think my siren is really, really tangly problems. Like I think when I think about what I like to work on, when you give me the biggest combination of tensions or problems, that's what I wanna, that's my siren. And so when I think about the question of challenges, opportunities, I really do have to hold back a whole bunch of rabbit holes that I get pulled into. And so I'm just gonna offer maybe a weak metaphor. We'll try it out and see if it works. But I went to junior high school in a school that was a 1-minute sprint from a cobble beach. And so copping pans, jumping from pans of ice was like the fun at recess and lunch and after school if you didn't miss the bus. And so I'm just going to use that as a little bit of a metaphor because I think there's 2 layers that I'd like to talk about. And one layer is the space between a community and university, which depending on where you are, that might look like this. But for where I'm sitting, it looks more like this. Okay, well, we'll keep them in the screen. And layered upon that kind of academia and community kind of space is a ton of other things. You know, the pathway between evaluation and research and the differences between them. But from my perspective, being pulled into CBR, of which I am, you know, now an evangelist, of course. How can we not be when you see the results that it brings to communities? Is there have been some really important bridging folks who sought me out and brought me along. And so the challenge and the opportunity, I think, are the skills and attitudes of people who are comfortable being in that space between those 2 things. And so I guess I want to acknowledge the long invitation, because it wasn't a short one, but the long invitation that some key people in academia have kind of continued to deliver to me. And so that's not just personal generosity, that's professional generosity too. So I think the challenge and the opportunity lays there. And I guess one of the questions I have for the larger community, of which I'm not really part of, I mean, I do think I'm the fish out of water, is kind of based, I didn't know, Dominique, you would talk about value, but this is really about value, which is, do academics, or how am I trying to say this? I'll try to rephrase it. Do academics value community members like me? And really reflecting on if that's an authentic value. Do they genuinely value generalists who have a particular role to play? And are folks at academia, because I'm just going to take the community side for a second, are they willing to have the conversation about value over and over again? And what is value for both parties? I think that's a conversation that I think sometimes happens in the beginning and it doesn't continue on regularly. So I'm seeing Renee nodding. Thanks for the nod. Renee, I wasn't sure if that would resonate with anyone. And I also want to say, Dominique, you said something that was really cool, which is engineers. What was it? Engineers are engineering for people. I thought that was really cool. I'm totally going to think about my engineer friends better. They're engineering for people. So when I think about value, I have two bees in my bonnet, and they're structural issues really, which is I will never work with anybody who asks me to acquiesce my network to them. It happens all the time. I'm not giving you my network. I built it. It's 30 years of work. These are critical relationships that were built over time. I'm not doing it. Build your own. And so, you know, from the academic community, where's the value in building and sustaining networks? I mean, we won't get into core competencies because that's what career development people do. And it leads me to this next piece. I'm a community educator. I can't do it. Like I can't live without doing it. It's just, I've been doing it since I was a little kid, which is don't ask me to train your students for free. And it's not because I don't want to, and it's not because I don't love it. And it's not because it's not freaking fantastic work. Like it is work that is just changing lives. But if I do that, I can't do my job. And so I just want to put those two big problems out there because they're future focused problems. One is the network piece, which is always ongoing. And the second piece is, you know, the bubbling new jargon around service learning. I love it. I've trained community health grad students, poli-sci students, social work students to the end of the earth. And I love working with them, but it is a ton of work and there's nowhere to put them and there's no time and there's no resources. So I hear a lot from academic folks that they see more and more the value of that. And I think that's a difficult problem that we're all gonna have to wrestle with. So I'm just cautioning from my capital C community hat to say, I'm very mindful of downsizing work to me. I want to do it, but there's a real big challenge there. Two things I want to say, two things I want to point to, and this is the very end, Bob, so you don't have to worry about cutting me off. Number one, I only sit on committees with really cool nicknames. It's kind of a choice I made. And so I sit on this really cool research exchange group, and I've sat on a couple, and this one's called Slice, because like who wouldn't want a working group with a citrusy kind of reference? And it's service learning and community engagement. And I get to work with Jill Allison from Memorial University, who is an incredible human being, really. I only work with people I love too, when it's volunteer work. And so we did a really interesting forum a couple of years ago called Combined Effort. And if anybody's interested, I can pop the link to the report in the chat if you're interested. If you want to know what my community context looks like, I'm sure it's different than other people's, but in Newfoundland and Labrador, you know, our scale is really small. And so that is our advantage and our challenge. And then the other thing I want to mention is a cool project by Zach Marshall out of McGill called Shift, and that's looking at community-based research projects themselves. So maybe some of you did surveys for that, and Sarah, you're on the committee too with me, and so that's an exciting piece that's really driving a collaboration between folks.
Elaine, thank you very much. I think if the moderator could interject just with some opinion. I think your question about do academics value community input, I think if you were to ask that question 30 years ago, I would have said no. I think there's been a lot of change, good change since then, but it's still a question that's an open question in some situations. Okay, well, I think we've had the first round with the 5 panelists. And what I'd like to do, we're doing not too bad time-wise. I'd like to ask the 5 panelists if they want to make a comment on what they've heard from the other panelists, or if they want to ask a question to the other panelists. We're going to try that first. So the 5 of you, don't be shy. Just unmute yourself and speak up. So is anybody going to be brave out there? Pretty quiet group. No? Okay, Kevin.
Yeah, let me jump in. Look, I think one of the things we do terribly in Canada at universities and perhaps even in communities is actually share and work together. We tend to get our own groups that we work with all the time, and we continue to have that behavior. And it'd be great if we could somehow create a central repository. And I know there's all these groups like Slice and Shift and Lift and all these things, but somehow how do we get a bigger collective across the country? And I know CBR is working on that. Part of the reason I think that's important is for the government to actually acknowledge the importance of this work and to fund it correctly. I mean, it's no surprise in the recent federal budget, there was 2.2 billion allocated to medical technologies. Well, why did that occur? That occurred because all the big universities and all the big companies got together to lobby the government to say this is the most important thing ever. We've seen the same thing, a group called Palette, which is all about innovation. They got $350 million in the budget. And I just think that collectively we somehow need to get a bigger voice at the table. So I'll throw that out as a challenge of how do we actually do that? Or perhaps I'm dreaming and we all share everything together, but I don't think that's the case.
Okay, Kevin, thank you. Great challenge. Now, any of the other 4 panelists want to comment?
Yeah, well, it's I was thinking and hesitating to launch the discussion about the voice and the sort, because at some point, you know, that also answers a bit of the question too, if we want to start a discussion. So refraining from that in terms of where we should go in terms of that. I think another challenge, Kevin, is that you did say that our strongest enemy might be the academics themselves. You know, it's definitely recognizing that when we proceed with merit review of our applications and with the committees, the harshest critics of any projects that are community-based are academics, essentially. And of course, the advice we often receive is, why don't you have more community-based members on your committees to be able to review? And that sounds like an easy solution, but the diversity of topics, of organization, and makes it quite difficult for somebody that comes from a not-for-profit organization to suddenly transform themselves for an entire week to be able to review these partnership grants, even if we offer them a financial compensation for these members, because obviously that's not part of their job. Even if we do that, I mean, that's really an academic approach. So yes, that's a big challenge that I see in front of us in terms of our definition of research excellence. I think SSHRC is a pioneer in terms of how we've always considered the diversity of output. It's not SSHRC that is guilty of using the H factor in the evaluation. I mean, we introduce, and maybe an homage to Bud Hall, we introduced poetry into our documentaries and many different outputs that are very highly considered by the in the peer review. Nevertheless, a very applied research is never considered the same as a fundamental academic research when it goes through merit review, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah, Dominique, thank you for your comments. I think I would suspect most of the people on the Zoom call today would be quite willing to volunteer to be on evaluation projects for SSHRC. But I'd like to, I don't see any other hands from the panel. Oh, yep, Carrie. Carrie, you got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to lower my hand because I had my hand up. Yeah, no, I agree with what Dominique was saying. I think one of the things we've done around peer review is developed something called iterative peer review, so that it requires less number of people when it comes to peer review. There's other reasons that you could use iterative peer review as well, but there is a lot of challenge around that for sure. And Schultz has done a really great job in pioneering different processes. I did want to say, if you know, what Kevin was talking about in terms of a network, and I'm wondering if there's a possibility that we might be able to jump off of the NEAR program that we sort of reimagined at the direction of Indigenous communities. And I don't think it necessarily has to be you know, only for Indigenous communities. Is the vision that I had hoped for. The NEAR is the Network Environment for Indigenous Health Research. It was a $180 million investment over 16 years. And that we launched that in 2018. And there's a NEAR in every province. And what I had hoped for is that it would be a platform, not just, you know, not just a network, and that we would engage with other networks. So a network of networks is what I had hoped it would eventually, you know, imagine. And so, for example, we had hoped that it would connect, you know, with SPOR, the, you know, patient-oriented research, which is not only Indigenous. There's many other organizations that are connected with those. So I wonder, you know, if there's an opportunity there to think about how to connect with other networks, especially community-based and community-driven researchers and research networks. And maybe there is an opportunity to say, well, here's some of the networks that we're trying to connect with. And would we be able to see if we could find funding, as Kevin said, and maybe make this a broader network? I don't know, I'm really pie in the sky here, but you know, it is a viable network. It's funded for 16 years. You know, maybe there's something there. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Now, Renee, do you have any perspective?
I have lots of opinions. You know, I think, and thank you, Elaine. I saw your hand was up too, and fantastic. Our fishes will stick together on the Atlantic Ocean. I think it's really like the 16-year funding model for the NEARs, I think, is one of the most stellar examples of ways of really supporting and investing in community-based research. I mean, all of the points that have been raised are really important. The other aspect that I was partly thinking about in the context of our future work, so maybe this will help segue into the next conversation. You know, Sean Wilson wrote about his thesis work and wrote the book Researcher's Ceremony, and really understanding how giving voice to how the research experience can be transformative. And I think that that's another element or aspect of community-based research that's incredibly important and valuable. And that we've been learning, certainly through our work with CAN, that, you know, the end result, the findings, the lessons learned, those are really important, but the process from start to finish, the way that we engage, the way that we learn from each other, the way that that if you don't go through a community-based research process changed, you're not doing it right. And that we've, as much as I want to see, you know, a fantastic knowledge translation and policy reform, I know that the women and the men, the people who've been part of our research, that lives have changed, that lives are better because of being part of a research project, which is a really interesting responsibility and context that happens, but that opportunity to be cared for, to be heard, to have somebody say, I believe your story, that part of community-based research, and I'm not sure how that gets valued or how it gets reported, but I know that it's really central to how we've understood our responsibility as community-based researchers, and that this is, you know, not to be too, you know, too much, but you know, it really becomes a calling, right, to be part of this work. So I just wanted to
thank you, Renee. We've got a little bit of time, and I see a lot of faces that haven't had they look to me like they have comments or questions, but they're going to have to be very brief. So we'll see if this technology works. Is there anybody that's on the chat or any of the participants would like to make a comment? You just wave your hand up. I see Merrick there. Merrick, you got to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, Mary.
Yes, okay. Well, you know, I just recently retired after 50 years of teaching at the university. And my whole life, I've been also involved in community. I was teaching courses like community psychology, community development, community leadership. And over these years, I've learned that only a small percentage of college students know something about the issues we are discussing today. All the others have no clue at all. And they later, after graduation, they are members of the government. They decide about funding, they decide about policies, but they know nothing about all those things. So is that the way to resolve it somehow? It seems that yes, we had a lot of discussions about this recently. One is we need to think how to include in the curriculum at the university knowledge about all those things we discussed today. And some other related to community development, community research. And the second, which is even more important, I think, is to go lower to the K-12 education and start teaching children, start their teaching by doing. What is the importance of all those things? Because when they come to the end of high school and they have to choose the major, well, there is a much better chance that we'll have more students who are interested in community development, community building, community research, and so on. So I've been the president of Global Network for Sustainable Development for the last few years. And our mission was to go to schools and create sustainability clubs in schools and involve students in community projects. And more, we are convinced that we need to look also not only into the research, but also into the educational part of it. So that's my comment.
Great, Merrick. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to jump in here? Bud, you want to comment? You got to unmute yourself. No, nobody else is brave enough here in this group. Yeah, I could give more opinion, but when I give opinion, it's sometimes a little controversial. So I've already given a little bit today. Okay, I think we're getting.
Bob?
Yes, Steve.
I just wanted to comment on how great everybody on the panel was and really great perspectives. And Elaine, you used a word that's really close to my heart, authentic. How do you know when the community university partnerships are truly authentic? And in my role, I'm executive of this, you talked about your network and you don't want to give up your network. And I totally get that. As executive director of the Surrey campus of SFU, my job is summarized in 2 words: show up. Like literally just show up in the community, not with a university agenda. This is what we want. This is, just literally recognizing that the university in our community is part of the community. It's not an ivory tower. We're very porous in terms of our boundaries here, and literally showing up is a job for a post-secondary institution.
Right, thanks, Steve. Okay, now we're down to our last question, our last suggestion, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists to comment, but maybe just build it around one theme. So what can we do together, this group? What can we do together or subgroups to build a stronger community-based research agenda in Canada? So Carrie, we'll start with you. You have commented on some of this already, but I'd like everybody, each panelist, to maybe give it a succinct 1-minute comment. Carrie?
How to build a stronger.
How to build a stronger community-based research agenda, not just a group, but how do we promote the agenda, push forward community-based research in Canada?
Great, yeah. So yeah, again, I think it's, I think this really has to come from community, and we can't underestimate elders. Elders are our PhDs, and this is why we really have to shift the academy. The academy is important, but it has to come from the community. The community needs to decide who they want to partner with. And that's why sovereignty and self-determination is priority. And the shift has to come from community. And I know this is hard. This is not an easy thing. You know, we're trained in the academy, and you know, as the last speaker just said, you know, we have to have much more emphasis on community-based research. But for Indigenous people, you know, we're First Peoples here, and so it's really important that our views are priority. And so you know, it has to really, why do we think we have a $100.8 million investment in the NEARS for 16 years? Because, you know, it is important that we are now leading the research, and we are choosing what partners that we're going to work with. And of course, we're going to work with the academy, but the coin has flipped. And so that is why we have elders now being able to lead our own research, being able to be the NPIs. And yes, Renee, I agree with you. We do have to change the language, but the fact is that we're on that right path. And we know the elders have said that we're all here on Turtle Island together, and we have to work together. But at the same time, and I know I'm over my minute, but at the same time, Indigenous peoples do need to lead the Indigenous health research or research agenda in general. And I just want to thank the elder today and thank all of you. Chimagwich.
Thank you, Carrie. Renee?
It feels embarrassing to follow Carrie. It was
Renee?
fantastic. But I think, you know,
You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. So just, I think, you know, that the more we continue to promote and demystify research, right? That we've, you know, the hallowed halls of research, you know, there's so many ways to engage. And I think, you know, I have colleagues who say, well, I'm not a researcher, and I'm looking at them and saying, well, you've been part of 7 different research projects we've worked on in Canada and internationally. You show up, you come to the meetings, you talk with us about what we're seeing and learning, you help us, you're doing analysis. We just haven't labeled it in this way that you would formally learn in an institution. So I think that that's a really, really important opportunity for us to think about. You know, there are important methodologies and approaches to research, but it's something that we can all be part of. And I think along with that, bring community forward. Help us to have a platform. I think, Kevin, you were mentioning, you know, who lobbied for what in the federal government budget. Help us to get there. Help us to leverage and access the amazing infrastructures of universities. We're having conversations about how do you get library access? How do you get access to financial supports? How do you get access to, you know, people who will help us do the work and do the reporting so that we can keep doing the research? So I think there's a lot of opening doors and sharing resources and really pushing forward community voices. That's important work to be doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Renee. Now, Kevin? Oh, no, sorry, not Kevin, Dominique. I'm getting out of order here. Dominique.
Kevin was just taking a deep breath for his minute, and then nope, not your turn. Sorry, Kevin. I think I'll expand on what Carrie and Renee are saying, you know, because Carrie really argues really clearly about the self-determination in the context of Indigenous research. But if you expand it to community-based research in general, I think it's about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's about making sure that the voices of the people with the lived experience are at the center of the research, because as long as the discussion, you know, remains how academia can receive better support to do community-based research, then it's going to be difficult because we have a limited influence on the government in the sense that, you know, we don't elect those governments. Regions elect those governments. And if you want to end up in a federal budget, it's because somebody out there is asking for that money. And it needs to be heard. And if those groups that you're working with are asking for that support because they need that partnership with you, then you will appear in the federal budget.
Thank you. That's sage advice. Now, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Look, I think, again, as much as we think we might be very collaborative and work collectively, we've got to keep increasing how we work collectively across the country, across the regions, across projects. We shouldn't be shy. We are very shy about lobbying government. That's come up from Dominique and others. you know, the people that get funded are the people that make a noise about the impact that they're having. So we have to continue to do that. I think picking up on what Elaine said earlier, for us in academia, again, we might think we're doing this. How do we value our community participants in research? I don't think we probably do the best job on that, so let's continue to work on that. And then finally, you know, I think perhaps, you know, could we focus our activities around sustainable development goals, for example, or UNDRIP, to really sort of catalyze the attention we're getting from different groups across the country, and that might also be politicians. I don't think we've taken good advantage of that as a group of CBR.
Great, thank you. Now, Elaine.
I'm hopelessly wearing the career development hat all over the place here. Apologies, guys. Our last community-based research project, throughout 3.5 years, the individuals doing the work with individuals, career development practitioners, and the people they serve, we called them community-based researchers for 3.5 years. They didn't believe it for 2.5 years. They didn't believe it for the 3rd year. And at the 3.5 year mark, when we celebrated the success of the learning and all the unintended outcomes and how they changed career development in Canada, they believed it. And so I think just because I wear that lens of language being powerful and honoring the investment of those particular 25 researchers, they all now know their accomplishment statements that they have added to their resumes because we co-wrote them with them. See what you're doing now, it's a thing. So, you know, so I just keep coming back to the theme of belonging, which I know if I say it, it means a lot of different things to different people, but the agendaless connections when someone's having a relationship with you without asking for something, I think that is what research exchange groups do. I think the value of agendaless conversations is where people figure out if you're fit to talk to and if you want to have a further conversation. And from a community perspective, I don't want to partner with anyone if I don't know them yet. And that goes back to the value piece. And I also think part of the calling people's work by the right name is about broadening the scope and space of what we call research. And I think that's the future of CBR Canada. So I guess my call to us all is, you know, what can you do to help build that long invitation for other people? And so I put in the chat about Jana's work with the community of practice. I've fallen madly in love with 3 new people because of 2 of those events. And so I think there's a lot of value in what we can all do to build belonging. So I'm a little excited about that.
Thank you, Elaine. I liked your hands, okay? You started here, then you moved them off there, but I think the trick is to bring them closer. And one of the comments that a couple of the panelists have made is just show up at meetings, go participate. And there are lots of little technical things you can do, but you've got to have a community of people, both academics and communities and government, that are interested in working on these issues. I would also say, and it was mentioned, I think once, don't underestimate the value of the training component of community-based research, because I know from my experience with the Center for Community-Based Research, there's a lot of the people that have moved through there have gone into community leadership roles and are doing some interesting social change and social dynamic work around Canada. Anyway, we're right on 60 minutes. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, I think. Steve?
Wow, thanks, Bob, and thanks everyone on the panel. That was amazing. If I could just add, I think it's going like this to this to this in some kind of authentic way.
I didn't want to get too familiar.
Well, get to know each other. That's awesome. And I just want to say, Carrie, that the elders are our PhDs. I love that expression. I think that's so true, because it not just represents the importance of the elders, but it speaks to the fact that knowledge comes in many, many different forms. And to some extent, we're all the expert of our own experience, and acknowledging the different ways that we know things is really kind of the complicated part of the soup, that it's not just traditional academic knowledge that should govern the day. So thank you for that. So I get to bring us back to trivia. Do you have your test in front of you, your test sheet? Remember, there's going to be a really big prize at the end of this, so make sure you keep track of your score, because we'll look at the end and we'll have some prizes. So CBR Canada held its first national summit in Waterloo, Ontario in 2014. What was the title of the event? Where do we go from here? New directions for community-based research. B, pursuing excellence in collaborative community campus research. C, Oktoberfest splendors. Polka polka, can you shake it all about? Or D, Indigenous knowledge and learning, engaging with community-based research. Just leave that up for a second. Okay. Maybe we go to the next one. Now, CBR Canada is a small but mighty, I'm adding an editorial there, mighty nonprofit organization. How many full-time staff does CBR Canada employ? Is it 3, is it 2, is it 1, or is it none? With that, I want to turn it over to my very accomplished co-chair, Joanna, for the next segment of our program.
Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you very much, the panel participants, and your important voice is really valued. Community-Based Research Canada is trying to be this space for many years to really collaboratively link these pockets of different accomplishments across Canada in many different projects, and also make us more familiar with each other. And we have right now a program that allows us to do that by having 2 different community of practice gatherings every month to just join in and meet others who are across Canada. I am very pleased right now to transition us into the second part of our celebration today, and this is the award celebration. And in some ways, this is a very much groundbreaking moment. This is the first time CBR Canada is granting 2 national awards: the Emerging Community-Based Researcher and the Excellence in Community Campus Research Partnership. These awards are meant to recognize and celebrate the growing field of community-based research in Canada. They draw really attention to several amazing people who have been leading the way through the exceptional work. Both these awards are sponsored by Social Sciences and Community and Humanities Research Council. So thank you, Shirk. You can see on this map, in total, we received 32 outstanding nominations from across Canada for these 2 awards. It was nearly impossible to identify only 1 leader for each category. Exceptional quality of all submissions. We're very, very pleased with that. I would like each of us to take time to learn more about each of these important projects and about these brilliant people behind them. And you can visit CBR Canada website, and you can read in CBR Canada newsletters more about these projects. So I would like to say congratulations to all the nominees. Canada rocks with community-based research. At this moment, I would like to welcome back Dominique. If you can please introduce our Emerging Community-Based Researcher Award recipient for 2021. The award is sponsored by Shirk.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Joanna. It's really a pleasure for me to introduce that prize. In fact, we did note that at least 3 of the recipients of the awards were funded by SSHRC, which clearly demonstrates our commitment to community-based research. So it's really great to introduce, especially for the emerging. Nowadays, emerging, what does it mean? It's a very sometimes a very large definition, but definitely that researcher, well, it's emerging maybe because she's younger, but what she's doing is quite exceptional. So it's really our pleasure to give that award to Mariam Khan. She is assistant professor in the Faculty of Social Work at Wilfrid Laurier University. She engages in community-based research and activism with diverse groups such as LGBTQ2+, Muslims, women fleeing violence, people living with mental health and addictions. Currently, Mariam holds 2 SSHRC grants with Salam Canada, a national organization for people who identify as Muslim, queer, and transgender. And she's certainly committed to build research capacity that advances social justice. So welcome, Mariam, and congratulations for that award.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Dominique, for the introduction. I wanted to just start by really thanking Barbara for opening up the gala in such a good way, and I wanted to thank the awards committee for selecting me, and for the gala committee, and for everyone who is here in person and in spirit to support everyone, including myself. And I also wanted to thank the panelists for such great, insightful comments. And I also wanted to thank the research office at Laurier and my colleagues at Laurier. Some of them are here today, and of course, I also wanted to importantly thank the queer Muslim community, Salam Canada, for partnering up with me, and for me, this is so awesome. Like, I can't, I don't want to get emotional, but I am just so excited to get this award, because oftentimes people from the queer Muslim community that I'm a part of, they really get exoticized, and people come into my community and they pretty much extract stories and ideas, and you don't hear from them. So I am so glad that I am able to do this research, and I'm committed to the longevity of the research, because it is my community, and I think valuing transparency, participatory kinds of research, being authentic, really valuing lived experiences, and it being transformative and socially justice oriented is really important. And when I was joking with some of my colleagues about receiving this award, because I oftentimes people who are doing this work, who are community members, they don't get recognized by academia, and so I feel so good that that the work that I'm doing is being recognized in an official way, because oftentimes when it comes to tenure, when it comes to promotion, work that you do with the community does not get honored in the same way. So I am so happy to be here, and I feel so honored, and I'm so grateful, and I'm filled with immense gratitude and humility for your recognition, and it really feels good, because when the official channels validate what you're doing, you feel like, okay, things are gonna get better. So I'm really excited. So I think I'll just stop before I start crying or rambling. So thank you.
Bravo, Marianne. Thank you so much. We are very happy, and very much happy to meet you, and happy to recognize your work as a nation. Thank you. I am absolutely delighted to introduce the 2021 Excellence in Community Campus Research Partnership Award recipient, the Parent Advocacy Project Team. This award is also sponsored by Schultz. I will say a few words about this project, but we will hear much more from the leaders. What was very impressive, we really found that the Parent Advocacy Project is a national research partnership which is seeking to address the devastating impact and stigma of the opioid epidemic across Canada and around the world. This partnership is led by Rebecca Heinz from University of Calgary and Petra Schultz from Moms Stop the Harm. This authentic research partnerships involves many members from community groups and from coalitions, including Moms Stop the Harm, Moms DU, Moms United and Mandated to Saving the Lives of Drug Users, and the Voice of the Family, as well as several researchers from 3 different universities, University of British Columbia, University of Calgary, and University of Alberta. This community university research partnership was really for us special because it documents processes, motivations, and the impact of families advocating for policy reforms. The award adjudicating committee was especially impressed with the exceptional knowledge and community mobilization efforts of this project. Some of them include Beyond website, amazing, podcast, film festival showcase, active contributions to the Opioid Summit, to the International Harm Reduction Conferences, to the United Nations talks on World Drug Treaties, also several academic publication, and new funding for community organizations and bereavement peer support groups. So please welcome Petra Schultz and Rebecca Heinz.
Thank you so much for that, Joanna, for the kind introduction and for this award to the committee, for everyone who took the time to look at our project and selected. We are truly delighted and honored to have received this award, and also to have acknowledgement for a health crisis, which is really our other health crisis in Canada, and often a health crisis that is not much talked about, one that has taken the lives of over 20,000 Canadians since 2016. So to me, as a mom who's affected by this crisis, it means a lot that this cause is honored in such a way by you here. So I can't thank you enough for that. To tell you a bit about our project, I'm going to start and then hand it over to Rebecca. And for me, it always starts here with my youngest son, Danny. In 2014, when Danny was in recovery, he relapsed and he bought what he thought was one more pill of fake OxyContin, but in fact it was fentanyl. It was at the time when fentanyl just was emerging and Danny did not know what he was buying. Danny died, he was home alone, he died from an accidental overdose, and I found him in his home. And this tragic loss led me to examine, why did my child die? Was he a bad person? Was I a bad mom? And this examination led me to understand that really it is our failed drug policies that led to Danny's death and so many more. And this understanding led me to reach out to media, to health professionals, other families. And together with other mothers, I founded the organization Moms Stop the Harm. We now have over 2,000 members Canada-wide, and our aim is to change drug policy to make it evidence-based, but we also provide support to families across the country. And the work with Moms Stop the Harm in Danny's name, in the name of the loved ones that we lost, this is how I connected with Rebecca and with the other researchers and with the other moms. And it's really the lessons that we have learned from our painful experiences that guide us in our work forward, in our community work, and in the projects that we have engaged in. And I let Rebecca talk more about those projects and how we started out.
Yeah, we can move for this. I'd love to thank Shirk and also to CBRC and to everyone here today. It's amazing to be introduced to this group of experienced and, knowledgeable, passionate, community-based researchers, including, what's evident is so much Indigenous leadership and partnership at this event and in your group. I also want to acknowledge Heather Morris, who's on the call, who's the graduate student who was so key to carrying out this project and who submitted this award. So this wouldn't be happening without her. And also Mariam Khan, the stellar other award recipient that we're honoring here today. We conducted 2 projects, a qualitative research project with 43 parents, mothers whose children died from opioid poisoning and other drug-related causes since 2016, largely due to fentanyl. And then we engaged in a knowledge translation project to produce some videos to share those findings. And we've done a lot of advocacy work together, a lot of conference presenting. And throughout this, I think we've learned a lot about how to work together. We're a team of, emerging, early career researchers and experienced community advocates working together. And we're all mothers now. We weren't all when we started the project, and we've learned together. We learned about equity, about always sharing space for presentations and for papers and for taking credit for the project. We learned about resolving conflicts and working through hard times, because this is a topic that comes with a lot of trauma. And so sometimes, things are emotionally loaded, and we work through these things, I think, successfully and beautifully together. And we learned about making sure people were paid for their time and compensated well, and really making expectations clear. Sometimes academics move much too slow for a community, especially when it's advocacy and policy change needs to happen yesterday. So we continue to work together to shine a media spotlight on this crisis. It's just hard to communicate what this project has meant to me. I'm going to get upset, sorry. But it's really been so important to me, and it's such an honor at this time when we're all isolated to, to receive this award. So I'm so honored to work with this team and, to continue to work together, hopefully. So thank you, and I'm sorry for crying. We can go to the next.
Don't be sorry for crying. That was beautiful.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. I know that Petra would like to say something else, right?
So I want to talk a little about what this research has meant for us as advocates, as families. When we started out, for us, it meant a lot to share our stories. When you lose a child tragically through something like substance use, it's so heavily stigmatized. People don't really want you to talk about their child. They want you to get on with it. So we took this opportunity to share with the researchers about our children, our story, and the advocacy that we work, and what we learned from sharing their stories and the analysis of the research that informs our advocacy work now. And a very important learning from the research was that in order to be effective as an advocate, and that is something everybody can take away, is you have to practice self-care. You have to look after yourself. So as a result of the research, we started peer grief support groups that we now operate, and actually just received a grant from Health Canada and to launch these groups Canada-wide. They're called Healing Heart groups, and you can learn about those on our website. And in getting this grant, again, our partnership continues to evolve. We had the knowledge translation project where we shared our stories, and you see that on the CBeyond website, but also the research and the work with our partners, especially Rebecca, was instrumental in us and getting the grant, and Rebecca will continue to help us evaluate the work that we do with the grief support groups and family support groups. But we also have researchers at our disposal. We've learned that as families, we have powerful voices in sharing our stories, and there's power in the narrative. But we want to do what is evidence-based and support what we see with the evidence, and that is where our research partners help us and point us in the right direction. They can guide us. They also have helped us find new allies in the research community and otherwise that we know closely with. And most of all, I have felt that our research partner have always been there for us with unconditional love and support. Advocacy can sometimes be challenging, especially if you don't have a large budget. We engage a lot of social media, and it can be an ugly place. And we know there are people who will also always have our back, people who stand by our side and support us when we go to conferences, especially Heather, the PhD student, and I, we went to Portugal together and presented at an international harm reduction conference. And for me as a mom, it's not often that somebody is there and always makes sure, are you okay? Is it too much? So the entire process for us has been so powerful, and this research work and the team and the people in it is really a big part of what we do in our advocacy. And I'm so thankful to have had this opportunity to do this, and I'm so thankful that it's recognized here with this award. So I want to what I want to leave you with is the image here is something that Rebecca initiated and we worked on over Christmas, and we wanted to demonstrate that the people who die from overdose, they're not numbers, they're people, and they're people who are loved. And so we have profiles on our website of people that we lost, and we looked at obituaries and we talked to people and found these phrases that describe people. So each phrase represents a person, and there the images altogether is over 1,000 people representing those who died in Alberta alone in 2020, because the overdose deaths have skyrocketed during the pandemic for a number of reasons. So you can find these also on our CBeyond website. But if I look at those, I see a person in each and every one, and that's so important to remember that we're talking about people, and that's why we need the work. We need to change what we do, and this research supports our advocacy in doing so.
Thank you so much, Petra. Thank you very much, Rebecca. This is why we are talking community-based research is transforming lives, and also authentic community campus partnerships. We want to showcase them and inspire others. So thank you very much. I am moving us a little bit to the last, not the least, but to another third community-based research leadership award. And I would like to ask Martin Taylor to introduce the winner of this award for 2021.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Martin Taylor, a member of the CBR Canada board, and it's my privilege and pleasure to offer these brief remarks to recognize my colleague, Bud Hall, the recipient of the CBR Leadership Award, as unanimously supported by our board. There are few scholars who can legitimately claim to be true pioneers in their field. Individuals who, through their research and teaching, have laid the ground and opened pathways for others to follow, and as a result have had a local, national, and global impact on the academy and the community. Bud Hall is in that very select category. When community engaged scholarship was still in its relative infancy on many campuses across Canada, he was in the forefront as an advocate for and an exemplar of engaged scholarship. As Vice President Research at the University of Victoria at the time, I had the privilege of helping to nurture the development of community-based research at our university, building on the strengths of the emerging research and teaching programs at that time. When we then established the Office of Community-Based Research, Bud was the clear choice to serve as the founding director. Bud played a lead role in creating CBR Canada and went on to be the founding UNESCO co-chair in CBR and social responsibility in higher education with his esteemed colleague in India, Rajesh Tandon. Taken together, his achievements signal the remarkable leadership contributions that Bud has made institutionally, nationally, and internationally. Nor are these in any sense figurehead positions, as he continues through his research and teaching to be extraordinarily active and productive at this, dare I say, later stage of his career. Beyond the productivity and impact of his scholarship, Bud is a visionary who has inspired and nurtured the next generation of community engaged scholars, enhanced the reputation and standing of his university, and made a positive difference in our world locally and globally that few can rival. As such, he is singularly qualified to receive this CBR Leadership Award. Congratulations, Bud, and thank you for your inspiring leadership.
Way to go, Bud.
Over to you, Bud.
Poor Bud.
Bravo!
Woo, woo, woo.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to congratulate Mariam, Petra, and Rebecca for this just astounding, terrific work that you've done, and I'm so honored to be part of the graduating class, the award-winning class, together with you, Mariam, Petra, and Rebecca. As Martin knows, I'm speaking from the unceded territory of the Lekwungen and Sinchothan speaking peoples here in what we could know as Victoria these days. Thank you, Martin, very much for your generous words. I've really enjoyed our friendship over the years, and I've learned so much from you about leadership and mission. I really was surprised, and I'm very honored and humbled by this recognition. One of the wonderful things about this award is that it gives us, it's evidence that we have a viable national network bringing community-based researchers together across the country, and we are able to create awards, which is what you have graced me with today. I want to do three things by way of remarks.
The email address you're trying to add.
I want to say a word or two of thanks. I want to offer to everybody here a poem in honor of the 100th birthday of Paulo Ferry. All of you, many of you will know, was one of our one of the mentors who brought us to this way of working. And then I want to, Darlene and I are going to lead us all in a grand participatory poetic experiment where at a certain point we'll ask you to unmute, and then we will pour forth across the country, coast to coast to coast, with a cacophony of poetic sounds. First of all, as all of you know, we've been talking about relationships. So the fact that you've given me an award is really the culmination for me of at least part way through. I hope I've still got more time to continue to develop more relationships, but I really am a product. I am very much a product of those people that I've had a chance to meet and learn from. And so I really want to name a few of those people. My work began in Tanzania in the early 1970s. And from Tanzania, the names of Maria Lisa Schultz, Marjorie Mbilinyi, and Yusuf Kassam are three with whom the very name participatory research originally emerged. In Toronto, when I left Tanzania, I was in England for a bit and ended up in Toronto. And in Toronto, we created in 1977 something called the Participatory Research Group. And that was created by the late Diane Marino, Ted Jackson, Deborah Barnt. They were founders. And shortly after that, in Venezuela, I met my great and longtime friend and collaborating genius, Rajesh Tandon of India, with whom I share this UNESCO chair that Martin mentioned. We created Rajesh, Pancho Villa from Chile, John Gaventa from Highlander, Paul Wangula from Uganda, and others, the International Participatory Research Network, which began to share these ideas primarily in the late 70s and early 80s. The third group of people whom I must thank are those from Victoria, which has been such a rich and supportive environment for me over the past 20 years. So thanks especially to Martin Taylor, who appointed me to my role at the Office of Community-Based Research. I often have told people that he appointed me when I was 63 years old. And that was the first job I thought that actually I was qualified for and that I actually enjoyed. So I always tell people, if you're not 63, the future is bright. You've got much to look forward to. So I'm very grateful to Martin for that. And I've learned a whole group of people that I've learned from and continue to learn from, including John Lutz, Maeve Leiden, Leslie Brown, Charlotte Lopi, Jutta Guthberle, Peter Keller, Crystal Tremblay, Kathy Krull, Walter Leporte, Suryani Zulfikli, Lorna Williams, Astrid Perez-Pignon, Bonnie Ledbeater, Carol Hall, Ron Rice, Bernie Pauley, and the elders May Sam and John Elliott. And I also want to thank my sons Dana and Sean, who are actually both on this call and who have had to endure listening to all of these ideas now for well over 40 years, a long time to listen to a father. And finally, let me share my profound gratitude to my wife and partner, Darlene Clover, who is a community-based researcher of astonishing creativity and skill. Having a brilliant scholar in one's house is such an advantage. So happy birthday, Paulo Freire, the Brazilian who many of us have been inspired by, would have been 100 years this year in 2021. I was fortunate to meet him when he was 50 during my Tanzania years, and I thought he should be with us today to celebrate Canada Research, CBR Canada with us today. So I'm offering to all of us a poem which was written on the occasion of his 70th birthday party in New York City. And it's called Surf on Paulinho. I mean, picture this. 600 streetwise American and Canadian activists assembled in the conference hall of the New School of Social Research in New York City, where in 1932, the first North American meeting of the Workers' Education Association was held. A birthday conference for Paulo Freire, the most influential educational thinker of the 20th century. Academics were jammed in next to homeless organizers, were jammed in next to lady garment workers, were jammed in next to the Puerto Rican Independence Underground, were jammed in next to kindergarten teachers, who were jammed in next to high school students who are waiting to hear from Paulo Ferry. And Paulo, 70 years old, who had come to town to help us all celebrate ourselves through him, stands up behind a table on the stage. "I'd like to tell you," Paulo says in his quiet, gentle voice, "about the best gift that I have had for my birthday. I received it from a young boy in Recife, in northeastern Brazil, where I was born. He gave me the gift of a picture which he had drawn himself, a picture of the crashing Atlantic coastal waves. And in that picture was a man riding on what I think is called a surfboard. And on top of the board, riding the waves, was an old man with a white beard and glasses. That old man was me. It was a picture of me. And my young friend had written words beneath this picture in his own handwriting. He told me, 'Surf on, Paulinho. Surf on, little Paul.' And," Paulo said with a smile that reached out to the entire hall, "I intend to do just that." For Paulo was a transcendent rider of the waves. Waves of respect for the oppressed people of this planet. Waves of international curiosity, intellectual curiosity, lover of words. Waves of exile and loneliness in Chile, Geneva, and Africa. Waves of love for his children, his dear Elsa, who died before him. Waves of love for the final love of his life, his widow, Nita. And waves of love for his friends in such places as Guinea-Bissau, Cuba, India, Fiji, France, and, oh yes, for us in Canada. For if he was a teacher, for if he was an activist, for if he was a writer, for if he was a teller of stories, he was above all a person in the great and ancient tradition of Brazilian mystics. More than a teacher, more than an activist, more than a writer, more than a teller of stories. He carried with him a warm breeze of historic possibility. He carried with him the memories of many struggles. He carried with him vulnerability and need. He carried with him opportunities for friendship. He carried with him the new eyes of the young, and he carried with him revolutionary agency. He carried with him his hand for ours. He carried with him the electric atmosphere of a northeastern Brazilian storm. Paulo often apologized for his ways of speaking languages other than his beloved Portuguese. And yet he held audiences at hushed attention when he spoke in English, French, or Spanish in every corner of the world. He found ways through his distinctive ways of speaking English and French and other languages to draw us into his speech, to draw us into himself. So much did he seem to need us, his audience, that we hung on his every word, and we helped him to reach out to ourselves. I repeat that. So much did he seem to need us, his audience, that we hung on his every word, and we helped him to reach out to ourselves, so that in the end, we were his text. We were his words. He was our text. He was our words. Lire les mots, lire les textes, lire les vies, lire le monde, lire nos cœurs. Paulinho, surf on. Okay, that's it for listening. You now have to warm up your voices. So I'm going to ask you all to unmute yourselves. And yes. And let's see, let's move the camera just a little bit so you can see. We're now going to, there we go. There's Darlene. You see Darlene there? Now, this is a street poem. And it's a call and response poem. And we'll take turns reading the lines, and you will respond. And I'll start it out, and I'll do it slowly. Now, bear in mind that because of we're quite a ways spread apart in a big country like Canada. We've got people in Germany and all over the world here. So the timing will be, the voices will come in slightly unevenly, but don't worry about that. The important thing is that your voice, each one of your voices is there. So this type of poem you will have heard a lot in marches, all the different marches which many of you have been on over your life. This is one of the kinds of street poetry that is associated with all of our movements. So I'm going to start it out, and it goes like this. I will say, for example, I say knowledge, you say power, and then I say knowledge.
Power.
No. Try it again. We'll try it again. The practice makes perfect. Just think we got about 70, 80, 90 people here. Okay. I say knowledge, you say power. Knowledge.
Power.
Knowledge.
Power.
I say participatory, you say research. Participatory.
Research.
I say justice, you say now. Justice.
Now.
Justice.
Now.
I say change, you say the world. Change.
The world.
Change.
The world.
I say indigenous, you say resilience. Indigenous.
Resilient.
Indigenous.
Resilient.
Trying to send it to you.
I say idle, you say no more. Idle.
No more.
Idle.
No more.
Sorry, what's going on?
I say we are, you say a movement. We are.
A movement.
We are.
A movement.
It was
I
incredible.
say hope for, you say the world. Hope for.
The world.
Hope for.
The world.
I think we're at the tail end.
I say thank, you say you. Thank
You.
You.
We say that's, you say all. That's
All.
That's
All.
Yay.
It was just brilliant. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everyone. Amazing. What an awesome group. Look at us. We are on time. This is what we wanted. So everyone has been behaving so well. Fantastic. I would like to really thank all the speakers today and really acknowledge everyone, including Barbara, fantastic today, including our panelists. I don't have the names right now, but Carrie, Renee, Steve, help me.
Dominique,
Just
Kevin,
thanking all the panelists. Yeah.
and
I am
Elaine.
doing the poem right now.
Yes.
Yes, and Elaine, everyone, and also the winners, right? Sorry, and Bob, of course, who did the facilitation, but also the award winners, Mariam, Petra, Rebecca, Bach. Thank you so much. This is the end of our official part of this meeting, but the beginning of this more informal networking time. I will ask Steve to speak about it, please.
Yes, I do want to thank everyone. And I know it's been 2 hours. It's been a very intense 2 hours, a really great 2 hours. But if you would indulge us to hang in for another 30 minutes, we'd love you for that. I'm going to try and share a poem actually when we come back, but I do want to thank all the award winners. And Petra, I do want to say I'm very sorry about Danny. I do want to acknowledge his loss to you personally. And Rebecca, your tears about the research project, just for me, just so authentic about how we do community-based research. It is from the heart. It's totally from the heart. So what we want to do is, if you have when you go to a conference, at the end of the day, you might have a glass of wine or a coffee or whatever. We'd love for you to go grab a glass of wine if it's handy, a beer, a coffee, just water, whatever you want to have. And then we want to do a quick toast. And then we want to break out into smaller groups just to get to know each other kind of in smaller groups. And that'll be a kind of random assignment. So I have to go get a glass of wine. So we'll take 1 quick minute. Okay, so does that work for everyone? And then I have it's not in Bud Hall category, but I've written a poem that I want to share as part of my toast. So just give me a minute and we'll be right back. Don't leave, go grab a drink.
We can fill this time with another trivia question, if you like trivia. So maybe we will ask, I would like to also acknowledge people who we don't see, who are working hard to make us really well organized. So Julia from the